chat a little bit today about Sur-Thriving cybersecurity burnout. But before we really get into it, I want to kick off with a question for everyone to ask themselves, which is to consider on a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is feeling like energized and motivated and in control and thriving, and 10 is the opposite end of that scale, where you're feeling kind of exhausted and overwhelmed and disengaged and barely surviving. Like, where do you fall today? And no judgment, just awareness. Feel free to drop it in chat or hold on to it if it feels too personal. Where are you? And I'll say, welcome to the Sur-Thriving scale. This is a concept coined by my childhood best friend and I. That is her and I on the right side at the start of our friendship, and her and I on the left side, we'll say, after decades of friendship. And the concept of Sur-Thriving is something that we coined together, which we use kind of on a day-to-day basis to help us check in when the extremes of either surviving or thriving just feel kind of too stark to claim. So I want to ask one more question, which is to consider one thing that you recently said yes to, but you really wish that you had said no to. So again, you can feel to drop that into chat if you're feeling bold, or just hold on to that because we're going to come back to it later in this talk. So the agenda for the talk today is for me to share a little bit about my journey with burnout in the hopes that maybe it resonates with people and they can identify some of kind of the symptoms, some of the lessons that I've learned, the scars that I earned along the way, and some of the things that I'm still practicing today that help me stay closer to a 1, which is the thriving side of the scale, than a 10. So I've spent nearly 20 years in mainly kind of pen testing consulting, managing operations, people, services through companies in varying stages of growth, merger and acquisition. So stress has been like a real constant as part of that. But the burnout kind of crept in gradually. It started for me with a need to prove myself. I come to cybersecurity with a background in the arts. I've got degrees in studio art, oceanic art history, and French pastry. So like a real atypical background, which leads to pretty heavy imposter syndrome and a real need to kind of like validate my place and my sense of belonging here in our industry. I built my career by being the person that said yes to everything. And I really thrived on being that person that people could go to. Uh, and that fed my ego and really silenced that kind of nagging voice in my shoulder that told me that I didn't belong. But at some point in my career, I confused busyness with a sense of value, and I wore a packed schedule like a badge of honor. I found myself having like being triple booked, and I would bounce between all of those meetings, actually showing up to 3 different meetings in an hour. And I was like Hermione with her time traveler, time turner necklace, but I didn't have the actual luxury of time travel. Um, I did love being needed for a while in my career, especially early on. As I said, it kind of fed the ego. But the more that I gave, the more people expected of me, and I wasn't very good at setting boundaries. And I feel like there's this unwritten rule in our industry that says if you're not overworked, you're not working hard enough. And that just kind of fed into this sense of starting to burn out. I think the reality is work is going to take as much as you're willing to give it. And again, if you don't know how to set healthy boundaries, it can take everything. As I took on more responsibilities and kind of climbed the leadership ladder, I started to feel responsible for shielding the people underneath me from things like stress and chaos and toxicity. But what I was really doing was just absorbing all of that pressure and getting buried underneath the weight of it. And ultimately, I was robbing the people underneath me from the opportunities of kind of developing and growing themselves. Uh, I want to briefly touch on kind of the cost of burnout, and this was for me personally. It hit me in a multitude of ways. It hit me physically and emotionally, and it touched on my personal and professional life. And for me, I couldn't turn my brain off, and so I couldn't sleep at night, which meant that I walked through the days in kind of a foggy haze. I got sick more frequently. I already suffer from migraines, so those were triggered more frequently. I started to be really grumpy and irritable and detach myself from the people and the projects and the things that I cared about. My kids would go to school and come back from school, and my office door was still shut. I wasn't showing up to the projects and the places in the way that I wanted to. And that kind of lack of fulfillment fed the exhaustion and fed the burnout. And ultimately, I felt like I was chained to this runaway train and I just didn't know how to get off of it. So I tried a number of things. I said I was chained to the runaway train, but I wasn't completely passive in the situation. And various things did bring relief, but they didn't kind of fix the burnout. So I had the luxury of being able to take a sabbatical, which in the moment felt really great. But for me, the burnout kind of returned within weeks because I wasn't focusing on resolving kind of the main stressors of my situation. I tried to distract myself looking for an escape, which translated to doom scrolling LinkedIn every night, looking for alternate jobs. But that fueled the feeling of being stuck because I was just making excuses about why I was overqualified or underqualified or why I couldn't make a move. Um, I pursued therapy and coaching, which certainly certainly helped over time, but they were not quick resolutions. And I'm a lifelong believer in therapy, especially, and would absolutely support that for people. So I don't want people to think they shouldn't pursue that, but there's an upfront tax, I think, that is challenging. Um, and I tried what felt like the biggest reset there was, which was quitting my situation, kind of walking away. But in the moment, I kind of just shifted my stress to something else. So in hindsight, well, none of these efforts kind of fixed burnout. They did plant seeds. And one of those seeds led me to pursue training and coaching, which is where I gained some new strategies that not just helped me support myself, but helped me start to support other people in overcoming burnout, but also in being able to show up in the world in the way people want to, like being able to move through the world in the way we want to and have the right kind of impact. So before I dive into some of the strategies that I want to share with everyone about supporting Sur-Thrival, I want to talk briefly about some kind of fundamental truths that reshaped how I approach burnout, both in my own journey and in coaching others. So the first one is around the concept of control and what's within your span of control and how to adapt to what's outside it. So there are things like toxic leadership or budget cuts, assholes at work, or like burnout driven culture, right? These things are outside of our control, but what's within our control is how we respond to those things, how we set boundaries, how we prioritize our time and energy. And I used to think that if only I could optimize my time better, if only I could find the right job, that it would sort of, again, fix the burnout. But for me, the truth was that I was kind of playing a rigged game because the game I was playing was based on unrealistic expectations and constant demands, and I couldn't win. And I needed to learn how to play a different game. The second truth was around stress and the reality that, stress is inevitable. And it's not about eliminating stress completely from your life because a life with no stress is a life with no challenge, which just sounds really boring. And so I had to kind of shift my mindset and think it's less about removing it all and more about developing the skills to manage my energy better. Um, and I recognized that I was just carrying too many things, right? And there's no amount of kind of meditation or yoga or bubble baths that was going to help me fix that. I had to figure out what of the myriad amount of things I was carrying I could set down. The third thing is around the seasonality of life and adjusting our expectations based on the season that we're in. Allison in the talk before said something about being in a season where you're pushing and then kind of being in a season where you're coasting, right? And I think there are times when we're thriving and achieving and times when we're sort of in hibernation, right? Where we just need to rest and recover, and burnout seems to happen when we expect ourselves to be in that like thriving and achieving full bloom mode all the time, which just really isn't realistic. It doesn't mean we have to give up on those big goals, but we just have to shift our expectations based on where we are. And the last kind of fundamental truth is around defining success for ourselves. I think this is the most exciting and the hardest thing to do. But realistically, we don't have to chase anybody else's definition of success, right? I do think that social media and industry norms makes this really hard because when you start to pursue your own path, it can make us feel like we're failing if we're not pursuing like the normal or the expected path. But we don't have to look to our friends or our bosses or our family members to verify that we're on the right path. Like that's such an individual thing. And it's again, it's seasonal, right? So, it's a daily thing you can ask yourself. Stay focused on what success looks like for you based on the season that you're in. So again, while defining success on our own terms is really empowering, it's not a one-time, one and done thing. Like I've figured out what success looks like for me. I'm great. It's kind of a practice. Like I said, it's something you can do every day. Just like thriving is not a place of arrival, like a destination you get to, check, I'm done, and now I can kind of coast through life. It's something that we work towards every day through small choices. So I'm going to share 5 survival strategies. None of these are revolutionary, but there are things, again, to practice, and there are things that have helped me move closer to the thriving side of that scale. And the first thing is around um, not escaping the situation that you're in, but trying to move towards something that feels meaningful. There's a lot of research that shows having a direction that kind of fuels you more than moving away from something that's uncomfortable, right? So if you think back to where you rated yourself on that Sur-Thrival scale, and then ask yourself, like, is there one small step I can take in a direction that feels purposeful, right? That can give you a lot more motivation than just, again, running away from the situation that you're in. I myself am not a huge planner. Like I don't have a rigid 5-year plan, but I've got like a general North Star. And I use that to help me make decisions, even if it's just the next right move. And typically that reveals the next right move. And it's sort of a generative situation. The next strategy is around prioritizing what matters, because if everything is important, then really nothing is. So I try to help people limit their priorities to no more than 5. And again, this can be based on the season that you're in. And once you get really crystal clear about what those priorities are, like write them down on a piece of paper and try and be as specific as possible. You can use those as sort of like a decision filter to figure out how you're spending your time and energy. There's a New York Times bestselling author and podcaster named Karen Adachi who talks about this concept of a lazy genius, where she suggests being a genius about the things that you really care about, and then giving yourself permission to be lazy about the things that you don't. So focusing on the things in your top five priorities and then letting go, um, or limiting attention to the things kind of below six. So survival strategy number three is around setting boundaries and learning to say no. Once you clarify those priorities, it becomes a lot easier to say yes to the things that move you towards them and then no to the things that don't, right? But I think people don't talk about how challenging it can be to transition from that say yes part of your career where it's really helpful to say yes to all opportunities to where strategically saying no is critically important. But you can practice saying no and you can start small, looking for opportunities that have low impact, right? Like declining a meeting that really doesn't require your presence, or delegating small tasks, or before like automatically committing to a new project or coffee with a friend or whatever that looks like, just kind of pausing and asking yourself, like, does this effort align with my purpose? Does it bring me closer to my top priorities? Um, I like to kind of remind myself that saying no isn't shutting down an opportunity, but it's allowing space for the things that matter. And saying no, it's a muscle, right? So the more you do it, the easier you get. And realistically, this isn't just a work skill. I think we all know it's a life skill, and mastering it is gonna benefit us kind of in every facet of our life. And I think that understanding our capacity, and how much energy we have and our ability to do things, right? And then learning when and where to say no is a leadership skill that serves us everywhere. The fourth survival strategy is around progress over perfection. So this ties back to adjusting expectations based on the season we're in. Maybe now isn't the time for pursuing a promotion, changing companies, or finishing a degree, but it doesn't mean it never will be. But it doesn't mean we can't make progress, right? And we can look at how we can make incremental progress, because small wins really can count, and it motivates us to move forward without totally wrecking ourselves in the process. So you look at where you can make those small goals or those small movements, right? It could be like coffee with a colleague in a team you're interested in exploring, or listening to an audiobook on a topic you want to learn more about, or maybe it's just getting outside for like a few breaths of fresh air and sunshine on your face. Whatever it is, don't underestimate like the small progress you can make. And if you focus on the gains that you're making versus the gaps you think you have to overcome, it can completely shift your mindset and your momentum. And then the final strategy is just around building resilience. I think it's really important to slow down so we have the opportunity to speed up, because, burnout happens when we treat a marathon like a sprint. And, I try to tell people that of our top five priorities, we all need to be putting ourselves first. And I think that's a concept everyone is familiar with, but it's really hard to actually put into practice. We know prioritizing ourselves isn't selfish, but it's really a kind of a strategic necessity, right? When you take time to rest and recharge, when you create space to strategically think, you can make better decisions. You can really move forward with clarity and impact. And that's when kind of the best problem solving and the most kind of innovation comes from, when you've created moments of rest for yourself. One last thing, there's a plug. Slowing down, it helps prevent burnout, but stress still accumulates. So finding time and space to like release the stress, and whether that's exercise or creative outlets or, yelling at trees, it's a really important priority to take care of yourself. So, you can slow down, you can go further with greater purpose. And the TLDR here, I want you to think back to the thing you said yes to, but you really wanted to say no to, and ask yourself what it would take for you to say no next time, because it comes down to where and what you're willing to commit your time and energy to. Um, It takes small, consistent changes, but those things can have impact over time.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we're at time. Thank you, Dana.
Thanks, everyone.